Hello everyone, it's Tania Gabrielle here, Wealth Astro-Numerologist. Welcome to Star Codes, where we look at the forecast in the stars and numbers and how to use the coming events to grow and expand and just come closer to the source energy that we all come from, which is love. And in today's episode, we are going to dive into the second Mercury retrograde of the year. All three retrogrades that Mercury is embarking on in 2021 happen in air signs. And Mercury loves air signs because air is aligned with intelligence and information. And that's what Mercury specializes in. And this Mercury retrograde is happening in its own home sign of Gemini. And in fact, the whole retrograde occurs in Gemini. There's no other sign that Mercury is going to touch on. So when a retrograde happens to any planet, it appears like the planet is moving backwards from our vantage point here on Earth. And it's not actually moving backwards. It just is an appearance. It's an illusion, but it still impacts us because visually that is what we're seeing. And Mercury turns retrograde about 3 to 4 times a year, lasting around 3 weeks every time. And so when a planet retrogrades, we get a deeper perspective on the nature of the planet and the nature of the sign that the planet is retrograding in. And often there are adjustments that we make. And so these result in us deepening our experience of that planet and sign. When Mercury is at its slowest, meaning when it's about to retrograde and slowing down, or when it's about to turn direct again, moving forward again, those are the periods when Mercury is at a standstill that impact us the greatest. So the key dates for this particular retrograde are May 29th, when the retrograde begins at 6:34 p.m. Eastern Time. And it starts at 24 degrees in Gemini. So 24 is the number of home and family, also home business and abundance. It's the number of love, of nurturing. So all those topics will come into your awareness over those next 3 weeks. And the Mercury retrograde ends on June 22nd. Now, the impact of having the retrograde in a mutable sign and an air sign, which is Gemini, ruling the mind and communication, a very mentally active sign that's focused on ideas and plans and sharing what you're thinking and slowing all that down, is that we may fixate on certain ideas or fixate on certain plans, becoming like too engaged to the point where we then lose the thread or become scattered and confused or lose our concentration, getting stuck in the minutiae. So the double whammy of Gemini and Mercury coming together, and it's really a triple whammy because we have the Gemini solar eclipse as well, means that we may need to take a step back and a break from the overthinking, overanalyzation, so that we don't get overwhelmed. And so we're going to look at 5 beautiful ways to think that will help us stay away from that sense of overwhelm and overanalyzation in a bit. But Gemini likes to keep us busy. It's an air sign, it moves quickly. And so we may find during this retrograde that we either get really, really busy and possibly overwhelmed, or we feel this restless energy because we want more to do. Either situation, whether it is that we get super busy or that we feel restless because we want more to do, can lead to anxiety. So the key is to find some middle ground and to keep yourself busy enough that you don't become fidgety, always looking for something to do, but not so busy that you become disoriented and unable to handle things. Gemini really likes to share ideas and pass things by and explore. And there's a lot of humor with Gemini as well. So because it's the communication sign, there may be lots of news coming in and facts and information coming in and flowing. And so we need to stay in a place where we can handle what's being conveyed and what's being heard and read, and then share a message that is actually proactive and uplifting, as opposed to focusing on those items that are not important, right? So the other thing is to guard against being overly sensitive about what others say to you. Try not to take everything you hear or read or somebody conveys to you try not to take it so personally, and just use common sense and use reason and take a step back, right? So stay reasonable. And with Gemini ruling the mind, this can be an excellent period for learning something, taking a course, reading some important books, doing research, teaching, writing. It just serves as a positive outlet for those mind-centered activities. And you may want to pick up on something that you were interested in before and now dive into it again. Refresh yourself. Share the knowledge you have, or pursue some creative writing. Gemini is aligned with Mercury, so this Mercury retrograde slows down the process of how we communicate and how we think, which is a good thing. So we actually can take a back seat and look and become very aware of our words and our thoughts. So because it happens during a Gemini solar eclipse, which heightens the energy even more, and that's really the important story here. On June 10th, we have this eclipse in Gemini, a new moon eclipse. And that, any kind of new moon event gives us a new beginnings energy. And so this retrograde is giving us a second chance at something. All retrogrades are like that, where we reflect and look at things and have a second chance to peruse and pursue something. So with the solar eclipse energy, you feel more enthusiastic, more energetic, excited to pursue new opportunities. So after this June 10th event of the eclipse, that's when things will actually start moving, even though the retrograde is still ongoing till the 22nd of June. This is such a strong energy to have everything happening in Gemini at the time of the Mercury retrograde, that you'll really feel a sense of a second chance and new opportunities. And so you don't want to miss out on that energy. Now, there are a couple of aspects that Mercury makes. That means geometric connections to other planets. Mercury will be conjunct the sun and moon on June 10th during the solar eclipse. Very powerful. And that's a very positive time in the retrograde itself. So look for that in, starting around the 10th, moving forward. You can really use that energy for the next couple months in a beautiful way. So all the way through, early August. And then there's also a square that Mercury makes to Neptune on June 5th, where they're both at 23 degrees. And 23 is the freedom number. It's the royal star of the lion, and it gives you the courage to set yourself free. And June 5th is a 5 as well. 23 reduces to 5. June 5th is a 5. 2021 is a 5 universal year. So that's a very powerful time as well, the 5 days preceding the eclipse. And this is likely when you're going to be focusing more on what needs to be looked at. It may be a little bit more challenging because you're like fine-tuning things, and you may feel, because of the Neptune square, that you'd rather live in your imagination and dream world than be in reality. So just focus on common sense and don't trust everything at face value. Like, really do your research. Now, the moon, as I said, was also conjunct to this Mercury retrograde during the solar eclipse. And the actual moon in Gemini moment starts June 8th. That's when the moon enters Gemini, and it leaves it very early on June 11th. So this is a very powerful moment during the retrograde itself, where the sense of feeling and the mind, the heart and the mind, can be fused together. And then the retrograde ends on the 22nd of June at 16 degrees Gemini. So it's gone from 24 degrees to 16 degrees. And so 16 is about using your intuition to offset anything that may come out of the blue, and you've already been aligned with your heart, with your intuition, and so you can manage anything that comes your way by tuning in. And there could be some unexpected things that occur around this time with that 16 degree marker. Remember, when a planet slows down before it changes direction, that's when it is at its strongest. So this is around the 22nd of June. Now, in your own chart, if you know how to read your astrology chart, you want to always look where the Mercury retrograde is happening, which house it's in or houses it's in, and that will also give you some feedback as to what is impacted and how it impacts you personally. But in general, with Mercury and Gemini, we're talking about how we think, how we express ourselves verbally and in written form. And so let's talk about what remains in the mind when the negative thoughts have been cleared, when the egoic identification with your mind has been cleared. First of all, when you're rarely identifying with that thought stream, that ongoing record, right? When you're not identifying with that, you feel a lot more carefree. You feel more like the positive expression of Gemini, which is you sense the humor in life, you feel fresh, you feel buoyant, you feel alive, you embrace life. This is all the positive side of Gemini. And you're a happy and genuinely nice human being, not because you want others to like you, but because you really feel that love. Not because you want something from people, but because something's bubbling up inside of you and you want to share it through kindness and through attentiveness on others. The shadow side of Gemini and Mercury is to identify with that thought stream, with that egoic mind. And this retrograde gives you the opportunity to end that identification. The fear that the ego has is a loss of identity, right? Who I am to others, how I come across. But even with very little identification with the egoic mind, you still have a personality. You still have a unique style. You still have personal drives. So it's not like all that disappears. It's just that you are not self-serving and controlling and manipulating in order to get what you want. So it's for your good only, the egoic good, but not for everybody's highest good. So on the surface, if you don't identify with that egoic thought stream, right, you appear as unique as ever, although really in your essence, you've never really been unique. You're the same divine spark that you've always have, at one with everything and everyone. The point is, when the thought stream, that mindless chatter that keeps going and going, your programming basically, is no longer paid attention to and thus no longer believed, the ego-driven human being becomes divinely inspired. And that divinely inspired human being resonates to a new force. And that's what this Mercury and Gemini retrograde is really bringing into our awareness. And what remains then, when you've extricated yourself from that thought stream, are 5 kinds of thoughts. We're in a 5 universal year, so 5 is the freedom number. It is the middle number between 1 and 10, and it pivots left and right. When you draw it on a piece of paper, you can see it faces left and right. It sits on a pivot point, and it is completely engaged in the present moment. And so those 5 thoughts are, the first one is You may have residual thoughts that you once identified with, but which you now disregard. There are always going to be some egoic thoughts that lurk in the thought stream, but those remaining just don't have an impact on you. So the effect is minimal. So if you give your thought stream attention, that radio station that you're giving attention to will awaken the station itself, in this case, egoic thinking. So the only thing to know is by ignoring it, you tune it out. The station, then you're not dialing in the egoic way of thinking. So those residual thoughts are there. We cannot just say, oh, we will never have egoic thoughts again, but they are residual. And so the point is not to give them your attention. Then there are neutral thoughts, and these are just the normal things that you think to comment on what is going on in your life. And it's the stuff you actually already know, but that your mind feels like it needs to let you know, even though you already understand them. So things like if you're out of a particular food item, we're out of lettuce, or I need to brush my teeth, or it's getting dark outside, I need to turn on the lights, or this person didn't hear me, I need to repeat what I said, or it's time to feed my pet. Those are things you already know, but these neutral thoughts are totally harmless because they don't stir up drama, and that's the point. They don't stir up your negative feelings. They're just telling you what's happening and what you need to remember, but you already have that knowing. So they're just simple things that people share too, just to communicate or to be social, right? And then we have positive thoughts. Those express love and gratitude and happiness, and they just flow from the divine self. So they're things like, isn't this a gorgeous day? Or I'm so grateful, I'm so happy that I just discovered this. Or what a perfect pair of earrings. Or something like, I love how you said that. Or I can't thank you enough. Or that was the best apple pie ever. Or I love this. So these are exclamations that are basically sharing joy, right? And we just are in a place now in our own lives where joy is just so important to always tap into. And when you are grateful and joyful, filled with joy and filled with gratitude, and it's measured, then by measured I mean it's grounded, it's not over the top. Because keep in mind, it's natural to express the joy and love that the divine self feels, but even positive expressions can be used by the ego. And the way that happens is you're thinking, oh, am I not so cool for being so loving? Or am I not so amazing for having created such a great life for myself? Or, anything that you spin into this high that sort of separates you from others, or is not a natural loving expression, that's probably the ego. So the sign of a non-egoic thought, one that is divinely inspired, is when you feel balanced, when you feel at peace, when you feel grounded, while you feel it, while you express it. It's more subtle, and it doesn't need to necessarily even be conveyed to others. There doesn't need to be a declaration of it. So that's the key to also remember. And then there are thoughts that are humorous. So these are a little different than positive thoughts. Humorous thoughts is when your mind is not so filled up with the thought stream and is emptied out more. You're more light. You feel a lightness of being, and you enjoy life more. So you may make funny observations, silly observations about life, about the ego itself, making fun of it, right? Basically, when you point out that people are funny to others, you're expressing good-spirited humor. And this is another lovely way to use the mind. And then finally, the fifth way is purposeful thoughts, to actually have a purpose behind the thoughts. You're consciously choosing to think this way because it serves a bigger purpose. Rather than the egoic mind using you, you're using the mind the way it is meant to be utilized as a tool for intelligent thinking. The rational mind is an immense gift, actually, because it's a great pleasure to exercise a rational mind and enjoy what it brings. For example, you can explore many things with a rational mind. You can explore a feeling more deeply, or examine whether something is true, or study something more in depth, right? You can explore an idea. You can explore a possible way to go, a decision. You can consider how you do something. You can wonder why something is the way it is. And you can find a solution to a practical problem with your rational mind. So the difference between these practical and exploratory types of thoughts and ego-driven thoughts is that thinking them serves a purpose. And also notice that thoughts that are devoid of the word I, meaning me, are the ones that are more aligned with the divine, whereas the I thoughts, not overall, but very often have an egoic agenda. So you can feel the difference between the practical or exploratory thoughts and the ones that belong to that thought stream, that voice in your head that's just regurgitating beliefs and basically is there to serve you and no one else. So for any reason, what you're thinking about makes you feel low or bad or not bring a sense of beauty and goodness and joy, you can be sure that the ego is behind those thoughts, that the ego has hijacked your rational thinking process. When the mind is being used intelligently and for a function, right, it is actually the divine self that is using the mind in a practical way. The divine self has done this so many times in each of our lives, throughout our lives, since the divine self is actually what is living our life. So the divine self isn't separate from us. And this is how life is being lived. So it is life itself that is living through us when we allow it to do so. And when we're aligned with the divine in this way, we are following our heart. So the Mercury Retrograde in Gemini, coupled with the solar eclipse in Gemini, they're awakening the use of the mind for a purpose, for a highest good, in a positive way, aligned with the divine. So it's a very important Mercury retrograde, like I said, in its own home sign with that eclipse. And so an incredible moment in this 5 universal year of 2021, the year of truth and joy, to set us free from the egoic way of thinking. There are a lot of 5s in this code, as you know. There's also the 24 degrees that begins it, which is about love and home and family. And so it's a very exciting Mercury retrograde. I really hope you enjoy it and discover some beautiful ways of using that extraordinary gift that you have, the practical mind, the rational mind, to create something beautiful in your life. And also remember to discover your own star code at starcodeclass.com, which is where I have this free masterclass for you, where you just have to plug in your birthday and your birth name, and you discover so many beautiful aspects of who you are at soul level. And that's what we all want. And that's how we understand others as well. So go ahead and discover your soul code at starcodeclass.com. Have a beautiful Mercury retrograde, and I'll see you in next week's Star Codes podcast. Bye-bye for now.